we're on the air. Wait, hold on.
Light's not on.
Light's not on.
Jessica pulled the plug out.
No, the Board of Ed usually does.
Jessica.
And they forget to put it back.
They mess with you.
Ah, we're on the air.
All right.
Something new
Excellent.
every day.
Welcome to the meeting of the Long Hill Township Planning Board of April 22nd, 2025. The time is a little bit after 7:30. Welcome all. I wanted to welcome everyone too, especially on this 55th anniversary of Earth Day that we're celebrating. I hope everyone had a good day, and we'll go from there. Madam Secretary, could you please do the honor?
Absolutely. Number one, call to order and statement of compliance. Adequate notice of this meeting or hearing has been provided by posting a copy of the public meeting or hearing dates on the municipal bulletin board and website, by sending a copy to the Echo Sentinel newspaper, and by filing a copy with the municipal clerk. Number two, standard board procedures. Any meeting or hearing conducted by the board is a quasi-judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to issues that are relevant to what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate to a judicial meeting or hearing must be maintained at all times. Number three, electronic devices. All in attendance are asked to mute cell phones or any electronic devices as to not interrupt the proceedings. Number four, Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Roll call. Ms. Dill.
Present.
Mr. Hands.
Here.
Committeeman Lavender.
Present.
Mr. Lavarerio.
Present.
Mr. Mitchell is currently absent. Ms. Ogins.
Here.
Mr. Opalka.
Here.
Vice Chairman Jones.
Present.
Chairman Richardson.
Here.
Chairman, we have four.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, we're going to roll right into our agenda. Item number 6, looking at old and new business under the ordinance review. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mr. Jones. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just here to give you a brief to give you an update on the Ordinance Review Committee's progress. We have the House of Worship, which we've spoken to at length and have done some revisions. That will move to draft resolution for our May 7th meeting. In hand, you have the HPAC name change from commission to advisory draft resolution. You can see it's section D of the LU 171.1 Township Land Use Ordinance, and it is changing the Historic Preservation Commission to Historic Preservation Advisory Committee. And the reason for that change is under the term commission, there's a lot more administrative activity that needs to take place, and with chairs, vice chairs, there's a whole structure. And in speaking with the president of, or the leader of the HPAC, they have been requesting this change for quite some time. So I finally found where the issue was, confirmed with him that that is the what they want to change that to, and it is changing just two parts of the Section D of LU 171.1. So question to the board, is there any concerns with that change from HPC to HPAC? So hearing none, I would like to make a motion for sections LU 171.1 Land Use Ordinance to send this draft resolution to the Township Committee.
Second.
I would-
Do we do an all in favor, Steve, or a roll call?
Can we
I'm
just
sorry,
roll-
this is to forward it, it's,
To the
Forward it
township.
to the
This is
Township
the-
Committee.
yeah, this is not a formal resolution, so we
Right.
can do a voice vote.
Yeah.
All in favor? All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. So that will go to probably it might make the May 8th TC meeting. It's usually got to go about 10 days before, right? Thank you very much. Moving on to some updates for the planning board. So I sent to Administrator or Township Administrator Randy Barr a list of about 20 zoning map changes that came out of the 2023 Long Hill Township Master Plan. He is going to work with our township engineer to get this in the book of work. There are a lot of other zoning map administration that needs to be done, so Randy was in agreement that this needs to be in the bucket of work for the zoning maps, so it's not just done as a one-off, that it gets done as a project. So I'm waiting to get a timeline back from Randy to understand where this falls in, where's the priorities, and how it's going to match up with the other work that needs to be done. Any questions on zoning maps? I can send around the list of items that were sent.
So what will be the process then? So the changes will be made by the township or our board engineer?
That would be made by the
By
township
map?
engineer.
By map first, and then any of the other verbiage that goes along with that, that will be done
Which part
too?
is that?
Just in ordinance?
Okay, so there's the zoning map changes, which is
Yes.
moving parcels of land into the correct zones
Correct.
because they're not in the right zones.
Yep,
And again, I have a list of that. There is also the name changes to the zones, which is
Correct.
a different activity that Ms. Dill is working on to get that sent to draft resolution, so that way we can then move that on. I do not have that on the agenda for today to talk
Okay.
about, but we'll make sure, we'll put that on the May
so
7th.
that, I just want to make sure we kind of marry those two things
Yeah.
together, so the maps are accurate.
With the
Right.
zoning map changes, right, so
Yeah.
with the name changes
Right.
there, that too needs to feed the project. So I will make sure that Randy Barr, or Administrator Barr, is aware that there's that zoning map name changes for the various, like Millington Village Zone and
Correct.
Sterling Village Zone, and a host of other changes that we
Yep.
were going to put forward.
Great.
So I will make
Right.
sure that that makes its way.
Mr. Chairman, I take it then the ultimate product is envisioned to be an ordinance that will be introduced at the governing body level, will be master plan consistency reviewing it, and then back for a second read public hearing once all those items are completed and married.
Updated.
That is correct.
Yep.
That is correct.
And we'll have
And-
the honeymoon.
That's it.
And all of that is coming out of the master plan, from the 2023 Long Hill
Yeah.
Township Master Plan. So by de facto, the consistency should already be there, but we will make
Right.
sure to
Right.
reinsure that that consistency check is performed, so that way we stay harmonized with the
That's
master
an
plan.
excellent point, because we are involved in the drafting process, but regardless, it will always come back to us in between introduction and adoption.
That's correct.
So, educational, teachable moment.
It is a teaching moment for all of us, because as we move them forward, there is a little bit of table tennis that goes back between the two boards, or the boards and the committee. And also talking to the zoning board of adjustment to make sure if they come across something that is brought to our attention, that if we need to address it, we address it, or if we leave it status quo, we leave it status quo.
And their role being through the annual report, but don't get me started, because when I start talking about the annual report, I get on a soapbox.
Okay, so,
But it's government in action, in all truth, it is local government in action, and the zoning board, the planning board, and the governing body, the executive, legislative, and quasi-judicial branches, all working together, and so this is textbook how it's supposed to happen. So kudos to Long Hill Township and to the zoning board and the planning board.
Great.
thank you.
And
Okay.
I think, Don, what you're getting at is that when you make one change, it implicates a lot of others.
Yes.
And David, Tom, and I have discussed that, like, we want to move swiftly with the remaining ones that get impacted. So
Yes.
I just want to encourage everybody else, as we're trying on our side to, like, identify any other ordinances that now might be different because of, say, the zoning map update. We want to, like, keep a good rhythm going.
Yep.
I would venture to say we actually don't have a great stride yet, but hopefully we can get there.
Yeah,
Practice
with
makes
our-
perfect.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it's fine. I think we're getting there.
yeah.
Well, and
It's a
if I
difficult,
may
comprehensive
interject too,
process.
the draft is already started for the annual report for the zoning board, and they are scheduled right now to start reviewing that the end of May. So really pending the zoning board's time with that, and us getting through, the planning board getting through the affordable housing, you should have it in June or first part of July.
Okay.
And that'll help quite a bit.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
The legislative process just continues.
Yeah.
This is the gift
Making
that
the
keeps on
sausage,
giving.
as they say.
Okay, this is, has no end. Okay,
Tom, very quickly, so on the zoning map, would it come back here, do you think? Can we see a draft when it's done, do you think?
yeah.
Yeah,
Nice to
most
see that,
definitely.
just to double check
Most
it.
definitely.
Okay, so we have two ordinances that we have sent to the Township Committee for review. It has gone through first reading, it has come back to us at our last meeting, and it's going to go for second reading tomorrow. However, this group had a discussion around fences, and it was around pool fence. So if I'm going to be making a recommendation to the TC tomorrow on what's the way, how to progress, I want to first talk about it here and then talk about it there. It may be that it comes back to us again. So, this is regarding pool fence height, and the township requires 54 inches in accordance to LU 154.1, which is fences, walls, and hedges. We had three proposals, was to follow the current construction code, which is 36 inches. The other is remove actual height and leave it generic, where we reference the construction code, so there is no height mentioned. And the last is leave as is, and I'd like to cite an application that came before the Zoning Board of Adjustment last year on May 21st, where the applicant followed the town code, which is the higher fence, the 54-inch fence. So I want to talk to this group to have an idea of what is the recommendation coming from us, or do we just let the TC decide for themselves how they want to deal with that?
And I apologize, if I can ask a procedural question, just so I fully understand where it is in the process. Did you say it was already introduced by the governing body?
It was introduced, it had first reading
Right.
2 weeks ago.
Right.
4 weeks ago.
Right, we met, and we had master plan with consistency reviewed with our recommendation.
Correct.
And now, what did it have in the original introduced?
It had
version?
54 inches.
You kept it as is?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because I think what you're alluding to is it may be that if there's a change proposed, the township attorney will have to make a determination as to whether that's a substantial enough change to warrant reintroduction, re-master plan consistency review, and then back for a second read, if you will, and public.
And I'm aware that may come back to us. I just want to be in a position that we make a recommendation, even if it does come back to us. We make that, if I get called to the podium. I know that Committeeman Lavender did mention that we were discussing the signs and fences, and then fences, there seemed to be some discussion around the pools, the pool fence.
On the pools, is there a state regulation?
36.
And so why wouldn't we just reference that it must be in compliance with the New Jersey
That's the
state
easier route.
regulation? And then just, and
end
it's
it
fluid.
there. Yeah, that's the easier route. But I didn't want to make that executive decision. I'd rather make it be a consensus from the planning board.
So it's 36, not 48?
I thought you
I'm
originally said
sorry.
48.
Deborah,
Deb?
pool fences, what's the mandatory?
I don't remember off the top of my
All
head.
right, so whatever that is, whether it's, you think it's 48?
It's
I
less-
thought it was 48.
It's
Not
less than
50.
what
I don't
we
think
have
it's
in the code.
54.
I think you're right.
It's definitely less.
3 foot doesn't
It
sound
was,
very
it
high.
was 6 inches less than what the town.
I could step over
I
it.
can remember.
Yeah.
I believe it's 48, but one issue with this is that there are conflicting regulations in the code, which I think has been in the zoning report, is that under the 124.5, swimming pools has a height of, that requires, one of them requires a height of 54 inches and one of them requires 48. So
that's right.
they just need to be consistent,
Right,
whatever we decide.
right. So the 54 is sitting in 154.1,
Right,
and the 48 is the one that you just referenced.
right.
And I apologize for forgetting, but the introduced ordinance that we master plan consistency reviewed, was that that left the 54 and the 48 as is in the two different places?
It was 54 in the one that we introduced, with the changes, and it's 48 in the one that she's bringing up that we did not introduce.
Right. Meaning,
Yes.
certainly you want to reconcile them, and,
Hence the house cleaning, sir.
yeah, but okay.
Can't we just go back and
We can call that one
reintroduce,
back. and-
or not reintroduce, but just set up about adjusting the other ordinance?
I think at this stage, if it's before the governing body, someone can make a recommendation tomorrow at the governing body meeting.
So why don't we come to a consensus here? We'll bring it up tomorrow,
Right,
and then
the
Jack will
township
decide
attorney
whether
can
it's a
decide,
material
yeah.
enough change to
Yeah,
reintroduce.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing is that we align with the 48 and go with the 48.
Yeah,
That is
right.
the construction code, I guess the state's construction code, and that's already in one ordinance. We don't have to touch that if we adjust this one to 48.
So I guess all that's left is a voice vote if we're all in agreement.
Exactly.
Wait, or can we use, I mean, more generic language to include UCC code in case it changes?
That's even easier. If they adjust
I mean,
that, we don't have to do
As a zoning
anything
officer,
to
I
it.
would prefer that you use language that, for UCC, Universal Construction Code, because that way, if the code changes, the state changes it for any reason, then we're covered under the ordinance.
Mhm.
The only thing is
You
you
would
might have to
change
change
both,
the other
yeah.
one.
What's
So
that?
we-
You might have to change the other one.
We'll
Well,
have
that's
to go
what I'm
back
saying.
and change
We'd
the
have
other
to
one.
change both to be
I don't have a problem
consistent.
going back and change. That's a simple line change.
Right, those are
It's
easy
not a heavy
changes.
lift.
I
I
would
mean,
suggest
Liz
we
has to
change
write the
both.
resolution for me, but other than that, it's a quick.
So you're giving me a look, Steve. Should we-
No,
Okay.
let me look.
So it sounds like the consensus is follow the universal construction code, and then we're done.
That would be my
Instead of
preference.
dictating a specific height.
So,
And then if we have to change it in the other
And
section of the ordinance, we can do that.
I'm
That would
playing
be-
timekeeper on myself, so,
so just to be clear, that's on that LU 154.1, D, section 3, right? That's the piece we're talking about now. A private residential swimming pool shall be surrounded by a fence of at least 54 inches in height, but no more than 6 feet in height with self-latching gate. That's the section, I believe.
that's a section, yes.
So we would change that to, as in accordance with the
UCC.
UCC. But then it says, but no more than 6 feet in height.
Yeah, so I
So
think
we're
we're
going to
setting
keep
a
that into,
maximum.
so we'll go between
You follow the
4,
minimum of the UCC, and then we have a
Maximum
maximum
6 feet.
height.
I will say most pools have the shorter
Oh,
fence.
it's-
I mean, you're gonna
Okay.
have a lot of fences in.
But
It does.
if you do that one place, you should do it the
I'll
other
fix
place,
it in the
right?
other-
Okay, so that.
where's
that-
the other section?
That's 1, 2, or LU 124.5.
I'll do that cross-reference.
What's that entitled, as a matter of interest? I'm not going to go to it, what is it? What's that entitled?
124.5F.
It was 122.
Sorry, 124.5, subsection F.
Is entitled, what is that?
Oh, swimming pools.
Okay.
Yeah.
What
Okay,
pools-
so it's
what is it?
better.
Swimming pools.
Sorry, 124.5 swimming pools.
124.5.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Okay,
Okay.
so it sounds like the consensus is follow the UCC, boom, and fix,
Fix
and
those two.
adjust 124.5.
I think-
So most likely that's one's gonna get pulled from tomorrow's agenda, because it's gotta get sent back to us.
It would ultimately be a determination by the governing body with the advice of their council, but I think it's a fair assumption that the
It's a fair
determination
outcome.
will be made to reintroduce, but.
We'll see how it goes.
We'll see how it
Okay.
goes.
All right.
Might got lucky.
I was gonna say, so, well, there's one of two things have to happen, then I either have to tell the clerk tomorrow that we're reintroducing both of these, or or Liz or Steve, are you going to revise it and then send it to me to send to the governing body?
I don't have it,
No,
Yeah.
no,
yeah.
no,
That's
we're not
where I'm-
doing,
This is where I'm confused.
so my recommendation is we tell
Clerk,
the clerk, we pull the fences so we can make an adjustment to the language to follow the UCC. And then in parallel, I'll work on 124.5, so I can get that one amended to follow the UCC. And I will also search the rest of the code book to see if there's any other references to pool fences,
okay.
okay?
Fences.
And Steve, it's acceptable from the planning board to, for me to write just an email to the clerk to say we're We're pulling that ordinance and
Well, we don't
Well,
pull. We
no,
don't
don't-
pull
no,
ordinances. We're
don't-
not the governing body.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
oh,
what
I
I'm
see.
trying to explain to people. We're
No.
not the governing body.
I'm making
Yeah,
a
we're gonna,
recommendation.
we're gonna have a discussion, right, because it's second reading.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make the comment, I'll invite Tom up, say to Jack, it's like, we want to make this consistent with the UCC. How about this wording? Jack will look at it, he'll say, we'll have to reintroduce it, or he'll say, this is a minor enough change where we can just do it,
Oh,
On the
okay,
fly.
get it off the plate.
Okay.
That'd be good.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
But I think the planning board just by acclamation, well, or by-
Should have a voice
Let
vote
Judge-
and say, this is
Yeah,
what
we
we're
should have a
recommending.
voice to say that that's what we're requesting.
All right.
to
So
take
the
place
so the
tomorrow night.
motion is to amend,
Can I make the motion?
Yes.
please.
I make the motion that we make a minor change to this ordinance to conform the height of the pool fences to whatever UCC says.
For both 154.1 and 124.5?
Correct.
All in favor?
Was there a second?
Oh.
Yeah, Tony.
Okay, great.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. The other item is signs. There's nothing coming back to us, so that'll be a second reading for tomorrow. Okay, and now we'll move over to items for discussion. First coming up is the ground floor apartment, so I'll turn that over to Ms. Dill to take us through that.
Sure, I have updated the work template that we all reviewed last time with some more information to further kind of explain the background on some of this and provide support for it. And then subsequently, I also was able to have some conversations offline with other members of the board where we were able to dig even deeper into very valid observations just about what's going on in the villages. And so the biggest thing I want to start by saying is just to reiterate that this is not to really change much of what's already happening. That's the first point. And then the second point is just to give greater flexibility to kind of this funny phase that we're in our world right now, where like there's not a huge need for storefronts anymore. I agree there's like way too much housing going on, but at least in these villages, we want people there to encourage hopefully future like coffee shops or, you know, a spa or like something like that. That would be great in the village, but this is to support hopefully future businesses. So I just wanted to reiterate those two things, which is this is not to change the vision of what we would want as a village, and it's also to really just bring into compliance what exists now. So with that in mind, I went through the master plan and pulled some sections. I won't go into, I won't quote them word for word unless anybody has a specific question, but I pulled some quotes from the master plan that I think support it. And Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, the standard is that it's not inconsistent, but I also would argue that it is actually consistent.
There's
based on these
nothing
quotes.
wrong with it being affirmatively consistent. It's just
Exactly.
that the bar is a little lower
Right,
in that
right.
it need only be substantially consistent or not inconsistent.
Right, so I pulled quotes that I think show that it's actually, in fact, consistent. And then I pulled some quotes from the New Jersey State Master Plan, which after I read through quite a bit of it, and David, thank you for bringing that to my attention, they really stress the idea of redevelopment, which they define as not just like development, which is what we're seeing all the time, but redevelopment specifically includes the word reuse and adapting what's already there.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of quotes in there from the state plan that I think are actually, again, consistent with, not only not inconsistent, but consistent with, specifically around the idea of redevelopment and reuse. I'm not gonna say this as well as the state master plan does, but the idea is also in one of their sections to encourage areas that are already populated, so we don't go into open spaces and then develop there. So I thought that was another great thing that I, even regardless of the Sterling Villages, was just like, oh, that's a great, you know, any town should be utilizing kind of their village space, their downtown space. So we're not affecting all of our open spaces, which are becoming few and far in between. And then, you know, I know there were some concerns about fair share housing, but I would hope that this actually helps some of the housing situations, especially again being that a lot of the ground floor apartments in the villages already exist and hopefully are affordable. I know that there's a standard that we have to abide by in regards to like meeting our quota for fair share housing, but just in regards to like a broader policy outlook, like this is where people have been living for so long in these villages, and again, many of them on the ground floor or even just like single family homes in these areas. So I don't see any way that it affects our negotiation for our next round of fair share housing. So that is in here also. And then the parking, Don, I think you raised that. I did a drive. I'm more than happy to do this, and I will do this little exercise hopefully in the next week or so. I've just been so busy. But just for example, in Sterling, I was driving by, and I think when all of these properties and lots were built, they all have driveways, and many of them have driveways that actually lead into like rear parking lots. So I don't know that on-street parking would actually become any more impacted, and the development of any bigger property would end up having to come before us anyway for some sort of like site plan approval anyway. So I don't foresee, and I was looking just this afternoon at they all tend to have, even like I said, like a rear parking lot with several spaces in them. So I don't see that being a huge issue, but certainly can like get actual numbers. But it was hard. I was talking to you about this. It's kind of hard to calculate like how many spots are in each,
Yeah, but I think there's a formula. It's either 1.5 or it's 2.
which they definitely need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it 2 parking spots per apartment, or is it 1.5?
No, I think it's 1.5.
It's
Which then too?
RSIS, it's dependent on the number of bedrooms.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Which again, like I'm thinking about that 224, 226. They have like 8 parking spots there, you know. So I think
Right.
there's plenty of parking for all the. Funny enough, again, like in a lot of other towns where parking is limited, those properties all tend to have sufficient parking. And then in the last section, I just included the case studies that we've discussed before. That 224, 226 Main Avenue, they had the application that was before the zoning board, and I think 329 was before the zoning board too. But, I'm sorry, 329 Main Avenue. Just where people have come and kind of pleaded before the zoning board about being like a hard time finding commercial tenants at this point in time. So I think this gives people the option to in 5 years have an apartment, and then maybe the town is bustling in 5 more years and we can have a little more commercial storefront, which I think we would all love to see, but you know, remains to be seen. So that's just some further information I put in here, so I, take any questions or other comments or concerns.
I guess my initial comment is that I like the idea of not having empty storefronts. Now, I think there's a bit of a screening question that we have to identify what that screening is for those in the ground floor apartments, and especially those that may be facing the main avenue or the main thoroughfare. But that'll be something that we can overcome. Again, I like that word. I hate going by and seeing empty storefronts. All right, I mean, you just go over here and there's 10 stores, and the big anchor store is empty, and they carved a big hole in it. So that I like. I guess it's the RSI. You just need to
RSIS,
yeah,
yes.
so we just need to make sure that we align with what the RSI recommendation formula is to find out what those parking. I think that can be easily overcome, and you don't have to go around in the back of these buildings and count parking spots, or do a Zillow or MapQuest or whatever.
Yeah.
And I would be looking for one big change I've noticed. It's moving from 1,000 square feet to 1,500 square feet, or how does that work?
Change came from we talked about this like 2 or 3, and I want to say Dennis brought something up in regards to like what would, and again, we can make it like 1,200. That's not something that we can. I welcome anybody's opinion on that. It's something that came from somebody else like a year or 2 or 3 ago.
I think the idea was why, if somebody wants to build a nice 1,500 square foot apartment, why should they be penalized?
Yeah. And if anything that prevents from like a ton of apartments, it,
Right.
It makes nicer.
Right, what's the benefit of capping it at 1,000 square feet?
Maybe that's the discussion that happened a few years ago. I mean, it could be 1,200. I don't think 1,500 is. I know that the 224, 226, I haven't seen their site plans, but some of them were even 2 stories, which is like a nice, weren't they like?
No, that particular property was only one. I think you're thinking about 44 Plainfield Road.
Okay.
The top level of that had some loft areas, if I recall.
I don't know. I'd have to look. Yeah.
Anyway.
But I'm pretty sure that the Main Street one did not.
Okay.
But I agree.
I just know that they were doing 3 stories, so maybe
Right.
I was like assuming
Is
something.
there any benefit, Liz, to capping? Like, why do we even need to put a cap on the maximum apartment? Is there any benefit
Square
to that?
footage?
I don't, can you think of anything, Jessica? I can't think of anything.
I suppose you could get more apartments in a building, but.
With the lesser square foot.
But you don't,
Yeah,
you know.
with the lower square footage, but I think, yeah, you wouldn't, I mean, in particular, usually the cap is on the low side,
Right.
so that you
Well,
don't
for
have
affordable, sure.
substandard
Right.
units, not.
You mean a
A
minimum?
minimum,
Minimum,
right.
Yeah, a minimum of 800 square feet or 600 square
Yeah.
feet or whatever, so someone doesn't try to create a substandard type unit, but a cap on the high part doesn't make any sense.
Definitely the low
Yeah,
end.
I agree.
And the reason-
Unless maybe they were looking at bedrooms, but then you know, like,
Yeah, but the reason I'm
families
saying that
and-
too, because there's a situation right now where there's on Main Street where there's a developer is looking to, he wants to develop a property with residential. He wanted 10 units, but he's also butts up to the floodplain. So he's been working with the DEP, and the DEP basically, in the last discussion, I said, maybe he could only have 4. So if you're a developer going from 10 units, all that you want for financially, right, down to 4 because of restrictions on the property, and we say they can only be, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
You gotta
Maybe those
increase
4
the areas
units-
apart,
Yeah,
right.
maybe those 4 units become condos at
Right.
like 2,400 square feet.
I don't think, I'm thinking now that you're bringing this up, I even envision, like, I was in Morristown recently, and they have like kind of bigger, like, not big, but like like it actually might not be the worst thing to allow a bigger residential area, and it's just like a nice dwelling unit as opposed to like a bunch of smaller ones. That's inevitably gonna scream developer.
That's also going to scream non-affordable, right? So, and downtown, I think for me, it's a workers' village, Stirling in particular. So I would not favour expanding sizes to whatever, 25, whatever. I don't think that's the right look or feel character for downtown Stirling.
Well, it's not 25, it's 1,500.
Oh, no,
I
just
just
heard
threw
20.
out a number.
Oh, you said, yeah,
I'm
okay.
being generic.
Yeah, I think 15 is
Because if,
good.
yeah, the developer has
But
to
leave it
only do less.
At that.
at that.
You're saying don't remove, like, the cap completely.
No, I wouldn't remove the cap. I don't think I would.
Keep it open-ended, but keep a minimum. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think
Keep
you-
it
I
max,
think
man.
you're hearing from some people,
Saying
keep a
max.
maximum.
Give a max.
Well,
And a
and
minimum.
Steve and Liz.
We're talking about
if
apartments
they
here,
put a
not-
cap- If Steve and Liz and Jessica, if they put a cap, let's say if we keep it at 1,500 square feet, that's still a bulk variance, right? So if somebody comes for a site plan,
This is actually a question that we could have a further conversation about, but the way we've treated it, it's actually a D variance.
It is.
Because these are conditional use standards.
so, yeah.
They wind up
that's
being
the problem.
conditional
If
use.
it's a
Yeah.
conditional use and, yeah, if it's a conditional use
it goes
and
to
you
the zoning
violate
board.
any standard, then it's a D3 to the zoning board.
Yeah, which is how we've treated it,
Oh, okay.
If it were a permitted use, then these would be both
right?
regulations that would require C variance relief only, and not D variance relief.
Okay.
And if it was associated with subdivision, site plan, or a conditional use, not, site plan or subdivision, then it would be in front of us.
So that's where that came from. That was a good discussion too.
And
Other comments?
I have just a couple things with the other impacted ordinances, adding LU 122.11 and LU 122.11 has in it,
One of those is the Myersville one, Pam?
correct.
Okay.
And it's B6, it says apartments in accordance with provisions of subsection 124.1.
Which is this one.
Right.
Yeah,
so
okay.
I would add that one as also an ordinance that is impacted. I had a question about parking and ordinance 151.1. And the example that's given is for accessory apartments, accessory apartment, one per unit. So what would differentiate between just apartment with different off-street parking requirements than accessory apartments? I think of like, my neighbor has an ADU, which is very different from an apartment. It's freestanding, it's above their garage sort of thing. So I just wondered if we wanted to address that, since accessory apartments, number of required spaces is 1 per unit. Regular apartments is 2 per unit with a 50% reduction for the Sterling Business District.
Well, so now I'm wondering, Liz, how this, which is on, do you have this form in front of you?
No. Oh, maybe I do, sorry.
LU, so the template, if you flip to the back of the first page,
I think I'm looking at the wrong thing. Hold on.
is
Yeah.
that one, the one that says,
The cover page says LU 124.1.
Oh, got it, okay.
So we have an ordinance that, it's not just these, zones that this LU 151.1, it says in all zones in connection with every industrial, business, institutional, recreational, residential, or any other use, blah, blah, blah. So like, how does that, correlate, or possibly there's a discrepancy between what you're saying?
What I think happened, so the RSIS was instituted, I don't know, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, almost 30 years ago. And my guess is that, and it's referenced in our ordinance, and it says it's incorporated by reference.
Okay.
So it applies in our ordinance. It theoretically applies everywhere in the state. My guess is when it was sort of this blanket, nobody went through the ordinance to take out standards that conflicted with it. So that might be just a cleanup item.
So we have to abide by this state one.
I think you do. I mean, what do you think?
Every time I've had an application before a municipal board where they had something different, ultimately it was that you know, RSIS governs.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's the cleanest. It's cleaner because it's also uniform.
So Pam, it sounds like LU 151.1 needs to be updated to reflect the
RSI
state.
guidance.
Yeah. Is it RSI? Is that what you're calling
RSI is they've determined it to be a maximum,
Right.
so you can have a lower standard, but you're not permitted to have a higher standard.
right. What you always see is ordinances that require more than RSIS,
Right,
and that's where in the problem.
that would be superseded by RSI.
I don't think I've ever
You
seen
could
one that
have-
had less.
For the
Less
accessory
more.
apartment, for instance, you could have the one parking space per
In
unit,
this
and
section,
that
so
would,
we send it to
that you
Liz.
could do.
She can make those
You can
necessary
have a
changes
lesser
and cleanups
standard.
if we have to make changes elsewhere.
And it's technically
Just
considered
recommend-
Make it
de
in
minimis.
this-
Yeah, the
that section.
recommendation,
Okay.
right, so that way
Alright.
you have it.
Yeah,
She
they,
then
yeah,
has
they
it. She
use the
can incorporate it.
terminology,
This
de
sounds like a
minimis
cleanup item.
exception.
And we're gonna find out, this could have
But
predated
that's-
RSI.
Yeah.
The term used
And
for
I'm
the
finding a lot of
deviation
that.
from that standard.
Again, to keep on giving.
The section where we reference RSIS is LU 150A.
And it literally just says incorporated by
It
reference.
is, yes, it is, it's very,
158,
150, what did I just say? 150A,
150A.
yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe they're not contradicting each other. If it's,
Well, what I would say is if you have that RSIS applies in one section, you should probably just take out any other section that doesn't
Right.
just say RSIS.
but this is like a weird ordinance. It says in all zones in connection with every industrial, business, institutional, recreational, residential, or any other use.
Wait,
This is
where?
like a really broad.
Just
is that
as
a
everything
normal?
within the Long Hill Township border that touches each other,
Wait, I'm sorry, where are you
So-
reading?
This is the 151.1 off-street parking.
it's on,
It's
it's
on
in
the
the
page
back
that I
page
was-
of this document.
Oh, I see. So, yeah.
I mean, we get, well,
Yeah,
if we're
it's-
getting into
the-
an ordinance that applies to both residential and non-residential, then
it's
you
different.
have to break it up.
Yeah, the typically ordinances will have for residential, just you have to follow our SIS.
Right.
Anything that's not residential, then they have standards.
So it sounds like we should change this LU 151 and almost have two separate
it
or
out.
one ordinances that has two parts.
Or you put it all in one and just say, if it's a residence, it goes RSIS, if it's a non-residence, here are the standards.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
seems easy.
Well, but that should maybe be the next one.
Yeah,
that'd be
Take on.
Deb, just very
Like a
quickly,
domino game.
It just keeps
The
giving.
dominoes
It
start
just keeps
falling.
coming.
Yes,
wasn't
Tony.
there a study done by Tom
Please, Tony had a
Sorry.
comment. Did you have something?
Oh, it's on the
comment?
parking.
Just finish.
It's on the
Go ahead.
parking.
Okay.
Deb, was there a study that Tom did a few years back on parking in Stirling? I couldn't find it quickly. Do you wouldn't remember it?
I don't recall.
Yeah, there was a study done
I feel
that
like there was, but I'm not sure if it was before my time or,
it may well have been just before your time.
yeah.
Is it any way we can find it and just circulate it
I
back
can
to the
fi-
board?
I mean, I can look at it. So Sterling, it was Sterling parking?
Yeah. We went through
It
this
would
in
make
quite.
sense with the timing of this ordinance here and the.
Well, just make it
mention
some more
of-
information, if nothing else, a little bit more information to support. Teresa, any thoughts you may have?
So,
Yes,
Well-
good.
Oh, go ahead.
no, I was gonna go to a different point, so if you,
Well, I was just
Second
gonna
on
say,
parking.
now that we're talking about it, I actually don't know if the parking changes this specific ordinance as much as we need to make sure that our parking ordinances are right.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
I just wanna make that clear, that I don't think it's, that anything, cause like, we're not referencing parking in
No.
124.1.
No,
So
it's-
it
it's
seems
gonna
like
be this
we should
one,
now,
151.1.
maybe this'll be, I'll put it on my list of, so,
Yeah,
anyway.
I have some background I can give you on the parking
Okay.
as well, just from the master plan related stuff, so.
so just a couple of things. One is where we say 3 units per quarter acre. It seems high. So it was 5 per acre before. I think some of the documents that we're talking about are more of 2 per quarter acre. So maybe ratcheting that down kind of to the point that we don't have too many small units that are on a site, and it matches up with things that, other documents that are coming out. 2, what does ground floor mean?
Street levels, may I define it?
Because it's not in the land use, right? So there's a lot of definitions in here, because to David's point about the 3-story townhome is defined separately than apartment. So there might be something that just needs to define what ground floor actually means, right? Is it even with the street? So if I put a garage on the first floor, and now I have an apartment above inside this business district, does that mean that it no longer needs to comply with all the other rules that are inside the business district? So I think it's just one of those cleanup things to make sure that we're noting what ground floor is.
I wonder if, I'll check, I wonder if apartment is defined somewhere, because.
Apartment is defined inside the land use
Because then
definition.
presumably, you couldn't do a garage there.
Well, apartment's pretty vague in terms of what it is in here. Sorry, scrolling back. It's just one independent, self-contained dwelling unit with a private bath and kitchen facilities located within a building containing at least one other dwelling. Right, so it doesn't say where it has to be in the building.
Right.
So that's why if we're saying ground floor, it just might mean walk in on street level, right? I think that we all know what it means, but it's more of just, if we're gonna clean it up, let's clean it up.
Yeah, but I think that's updating the definition section, so that could just be another like. I
Yeah,
don't-
or we
yeah.
just put what ground floor means in the definition
Okay.
section. One of the 2 ways to just make sure that it's consistent.
I think you may also want to address whether you would be willing to permit ground floor parking. In these, meaning not structured parking, but sort of where the parking becomes, like sometimes you see, the building is sort of on stilts, basically, and there's parking underneath. And you may not want that, and so you may just want to clarify that.
Well, so that's
examples of
gonna be covered in like the parent ordinance, I think.
Okay.
So the parent ordinance for, Sterling Village, Millington Village, Gillette Village is, permitted primary uses. It's gonna be on the first and second page of everybody's worksheet. And so that's considered a permitted accessory use, like that's already indicated, and maybe that's a good thing to remind everybody, is there is like a parent ordinance for all of these villages, which is LU 122.5.
But you're talking about parking within the apartment dwelling.
Within the building
Yeah.
envelope, basically.
And,
Yeah.
you know, I know throughout the state, especially with our train line, that a very popular thing is to use parking to kind of insulate the building from noise of the train.
Right.
And that would start at the ground floor.
Because if you think about the beauty parlor next to Ancona, how they built up
Mhm.
over it,
Yeah.
right? So who's to say that they don't just, take the first floor, slab it, and then make that into a garage and then put apartments
Yeah.
above?
Because I don't think that's allowed in the parent ordinance.
Mm.
Like, do you wanna? we
Which
can
one
go
is
through
it?
It's on your worksheet right here, I have it. LU 122.5, permitted primary uses, retail trade, retail service, business, restaurants, financial, apartments in accordance with 1241, which is why we're working on that.
Mhm.
Childcare and any other use. So parking is already indicated only as a permitted accessory use.
I think though someone might argue that it's accessory, it's just on the ground floor.
Yeah, I mean,
And so it just, you might want to just be clear.
No, I
Right.
know, but I'm just saying, how is that different from what's here now?
Well, because accessory use could mean, oh, you have a parking lot, or like a driveway behind your building. But what we're saying is, there's a loophole potentially.
Right.
Where somebody could come in and say, okay, well, on the ground floor, we're gonna have parking, and then we're gonna build 2 levels of residence above.
or
And I
we,
don't think this ordinance is is gonna, how does this ordinance do that?
because if I've got a
It doesn't
2,000 square foot
prohibit
building,
it.
I split it, right? So I keep the storefront for 1,000, then I take the backside and I put it, so there's now parking.
But that has nothing to do with the apartment, you could do that now.
But I guess the question is, maybe you don't want that. So it's just something to think about.
But then you build up and you create the density, right? So that's how I'm looking at it, as if I have a building that's 2,000 square feet and I want to get these other apartments and I need to pass with the parking to tie it together, I might take half the first floor, put a 500 square foot apartment, put 500 square foot street front, take the back 1,000 square feet, create 3 parking spaces, and now I can build.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm the only one, I'm not following how that is affected by, I'm not saying that maybe there's not another issue that needs to be resolved, I'm just not following how this change, this ordinance already exists.
No, it could. You're right. I think
So then let's maybe table that for another discussion.
except that if this ordinance gets revamped, that should probably be
But that goes to the
considered.
density side, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right? So if I want to get around the density requirement and I need to get the parking, I can convert part of the existing building to parking to get more apartments above if I can have.
So let's go to the density thing for a minute. So again, that dates back to Dennis, and I don't disagree with him, that what it is now, just go to what it.
5 per
Right.
Yeah,
acre.
so that is so far beyond what is in existence now, what's actually happening. So none of those properties are even
Or
near an
conform.
acre, they're all 0.1.
Mhm.
So the reason we ran some numbers and landed on 3 per quarter acre is to better reflect what's there now. So again, we're really not increasing density. What is in the ordinance now does not exist anywhere, because there's no lots that are an acre that have whatever the calculation is. So I just want to make sure that that's also clear, is that was highlighted as an update that should be made because it's incorrect.
Well, I think I can't remember if it wound up in the final master plan or not, but the zoning board kept getting applications in these types of zones for this type of housing that we're talking about, and the densities far, 5 was laughable. I
Right.
think
But they
what
were gonna
we,
try to go 3 stories, right? They were trying to go height.
it's
height-wise.
not necessary. If you have such small lots, it doesn't take very much building to exceed 5 dwelling units per acre. You know, so I think what it was that the projects we were seeing, there seemed to be a market for 12 units per acre, and I think that seemed to be consistent with some of the other multifamily developments that were happening in town.
Okay. There's a lot of
Chief was
fruitful
12.
conversation on this,
Chief
and
was
it
12.
seems like we
Yeah,
have some more
yeah.
work to do.
That's not
Thankfully,
one.
this is all recorded, so we can do the playback.
Yeah, I know, I'm not sure what the work is though. because
I'm
it's-
thinking it's reviewing parking in and of itself,
Yes.
which is
That's a
separate
s-
from
that's a
this
separate
piece, so
thing, yes.
there's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
So I've got a note here to review the parking and to figure out what that looks like, what it's saying, and then see how we can incorporate that into what's going on here. And it would be good to know if the zoning board of adjustments is having these type of issues. It would be good for us to know, since we're working on these ordinance, right? So,
Yeah, I just wanna,
Annual
Well,
report.
that's what's coming
I know,
out by
yeah,
June.
That's
so-
the vehicle.
if you understand that I am like.
I'm gonna
no,
take
like
this.
we're like all over the place, cause you're talking about density and people building parking underneath, which is like, I wanna also make sure, like, we were talking about this with the houses of worship, I wanna make sure we're also not just thinking of every single possible scenario, that's part of our job, but we will be here forever, so like, we do have to like stop at a certain point and move these forward, this is
I
the
think it's
stride that I'm
about
talking,
giving
hold on, let me
guidance.
just finish, this is the stride that we're not hitting, and it's not that I'm saying that there's not other ordinances that need to be changed, I'm happy to change the parking ordinance also, and I'm happy to change other ordinances that are implicated also. But, and I'm not even just talking about this one, I'm just talking about how many times we've had to bring back fences and sheds. So I just wanna like implore the board here to start like also moving things forward and actually highlighting like possible issues. So like I'm not actually totally following how that is different based on what's happening now. If you wanna change the existing ordinance to, on LU 1225, then we can also do that. But I'm not following how this scenario is affected by the apartment sub-ordinance. And
It's,
if you're following it, then we can table it for another.
I don't think anything that you've done impacts it at all. I think it's just a scenario that maybe, it's kind of common, and it may be more
Yeah,
common with the flood.
It's pretty common to do
The
that.
flood elevation.
I'm not saying it's not common, I'm saying what ordinance are you saying it impacts that needs to be changed?
If you wanted to prohibit it, I was thinking more, if you wanted to prohibit it, or and sometimes ordinances will be specific about masking, like if you have parking on that ground level, that you have to have something along the street that's masking it, so it doesn't, you're not looking at like
So
a
which
parking lot.
ordinance is getting changed?
It would be this one.
Which one?
I think you're calling it the parent, 120.
Yeah, the
124.
1225, okay, so then let's add that to our list for another ordinance that needs to get changed.
1225?
No,
No.
we can talk after.
Yeah.
It's this one.
It's the one that you're proposing.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
124.1.
1241, that is not the parent one.
No,
So
it's
see,
this one here that I'm referring to. It's not the parent one.
The child.
For the sake of
Yeah.
time, and I agree with you on moving things forward, because it can be a little frustrating when you think you're there, and
Yeah,
then
and
all of a
sending,
sudden,
I'm sorry,
you
sending
change.
things ahead of time would also be super helpful, because like we've spent hours doing this stuff, and it's becoming like,
Yeah, we don't want to create more frustration than you need.
yeah.
Thank you.
Can I just ask
So,
one more question as new kid on the block? Under Roman numeral number 5, it's compliance with zoning ratios. Can you just point me where I can find those zoning ratios?
which one?
It's, existing parking infrastructure is sufficient to support updated apartment standards. And the second bullet is compliance with zoning ratios. Is that the table with the parking spaces per unit?
No, it would be the ordinance 155 that provides the ratio of what
And
is
that's
needed,
the
but now we
parking.
need to change that anyway.
Okay, so it's ratio of parking,
Yeah.
because it says ratio for residential, commercial unit. It's not comparing residential to commercial.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's residential to parking.
You know what, if you want to email that to me, it sounds like Tom wants to keep moving, I'm
Okay.
happy to answer your question, Pam.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Zoning. zoning issues.
Yeah, and we do work on email. Just don't CC everybody. Will Mitchell's not here to talk about the maximum setbacks on Valley Road, so we're going to table that. I'll turn it over to Mr. Hands on his topic.
My favourite subject?
Your favorite subject, yes?
I won't take long. I'm not good because I haven't got, just to prep it, perhaps. So we're talking about the zoning use, right, Tom? Uses in business BD and commercial uses and office uses, right? Tom, just want to make sure I'm on the
Say again,
same.
I'm sorry.
We're talking about uses, right?
Uses in the business.
Yes, that's correct.
zone.
Yeah. All right, so way back when we were doing the master plan, we went through an exercise of starting to map out what the uses are in all the zones, but let's focus on the commercial and office, and office is going to go away. I think we're removing office to a large degree anyhow. So it's just an exercise of looking at two what's currently prohibited, and this has been a favourite subject of mine for a while, and I use Jaeger lumber as my typical example, right? Deb, I have gone through this in the past, my favourite subject. So something like Jaeger lumber may not be permitted use in today's world, but they exist for many, many years. So why are we penalising some good businesses such as that, especially when they have issues here, they don't have issues in other towns where they probably are not, they are permitted, so they don't have to go through the rigmarole of this place. So a couple of things is just to go through perhaps what exists and is prohibited. Gas stations are prohibited to a large degree in town. Auto repair is prohibited, I think, in many places in town, but we have them. So one is, going back to what you were saying, Teresa, just not correcting the past, but getting us up to where we are and accounting for where we are. So that's one aspect of this. And the other aspect is how then do we maybe either, I don't know if it's a case of broadening or reducing the use definitions, especially if we want to be more encouraging on the state plan with, say, mixed use. I mean, are we going to go crazy and define everything or prohibit a lot of stuff? So on a prohibit list is quite, there's the old, use, I can't remember, it's a vermin or something. We had some fox, some crazy stuff that exists today.
Mink farms.
Mink farm, that's the one I was thinking of. Mink farms. That's the one I came to remember.
So we've got a lot of those.
Yeah, I mean, golf driving range, fantastic idea. Love to have it. But so it's just really, for my mind, unless anybody disagrees, it's cleaning up the use is within town today, get it current, and then think about how the master plan talks about any changes to that. So that's basically it. So if we can start thinking about that, and I've got some spreadsheets and stuff I can start to share when we get to that point. But this is quite an important one, and especially for the BD district. So, because there's various things we probably need to look at. So,
David, if I may, Liz, could you opine just a little bit in regards to, or Jessica, about how towns handle use in their ordinances?
You
Yeah,
wanna go first?
is it all over the place, or?
Yeah, well, there's two schools of thought. So one is you're very specific
right.
and you list everything that you're permitting. And the other is that you're more general and you list kind of general categories. And in both cases, you really want to tighten up your definitions so that, whatever is coming in, you can determine if it meets either one of, the listed uses or one of the categories. What I found more of the municipalities I work for doing is going more into the categories, because you are getting all these kind of novel uses like escape rooms. Well, what is that? What does that fit under? And
Right.
it's not not necessarily things you don't want, but so trying to come up with broader categories and then being very specific potentially about things you don't want.
Permitted,
Right.
non-permitted.
Prohibited
Right.
uses or non-permitted uses, so that, you can say, yeah, we like all of these, but, we're not into, these few uses that, whatever the typical bad uses that you don't want in your town, so you can prohibit those. So that way you don't sort of throw out the baby with the bathwater if you're like retail services, and just make sure that you define them really well.
In
It
that
gives you more
context-
market flexibility too. I mean, because you don't know what the market,
Exactly.
escape rooms might be really
Exactly.
popular.
And
and-
people are just
Yeah.
constantly coming up with
Mink
new
farms.
things, which
Mink-
some
But
of
those
them are
mink
really
farms.
great, and you don't want to necessarily throw them into use variance where they decide not to bring their business to your town because
Right.
they have to get a use variance to come into town.
And the way you find that out on the back end, if you do it quote unquote wrong, is you end up with applications for D1 use variances, and one of the standards, the second prong of the negative criteria, you have to produce, you've heard the enhanced Medici standard, or those of us who have been on zoning boards know the enhanced Medici standard. You have to reconcile, well, why is that use not on the list of permitted uses? And often the answer is, because it didn't exist 10 years ago when you
Right.
last changed the list of permitted uses.
Right.
It's an escape room, we just invented these 2 years ago, I mean,
Right.
now they're
Yeah.
older, but,
Yeah.
so, they have to go through the long process, the D1 use variance, the hardest, most costly, most difficult relief to get, to demonstrate that, hey, you just haven't thought of this yet because it's new, so it is better to keep it up to date, keep it, I agree with that concept of broad on the permitted, specific on the prohibited. Then I always laugh, what's the difference between a prohibited use and a list that's not permitted, a use that's not permitted?
Yeah.
I guess it's just clear that it's not that we don't want it, it's that we really don't want it.
It's hard to meet the Medici standard if it's a list of
Prohibited.
prohibited. because
That's a good point.
You're kind of usually saying, well, why didn't the master plan permit this
Right,
use?
right.
Well, if the master plan specifically prohibited it, it's kind of hard to say, well,
That's
they
a good point.
overlooked it, or,
Yeah, nobody's gonna come in and say, it's not on the list of permitted uses, but it really should be permitted here, it's a D1 use variance. There's some
Yeah.
sort of reconciliation. If you have it on your list that says it's absolutely prohibited, they're not gonna bother to come ask for a D1 use variance.
Yeah, but we've just got, in this day and age, we've got to be smarter. I mean, whether it's by size or feature or something like that. I mean, mink farms, fox farms and commercial piggeries. Now, do we really have to spell that out?
Yeah, right, no, I agree with
It
you.
is, it's
I-
more about,
gotta be up to date.
it's more about capacity, use, purpose,
Yeah.
and those type of things, not just general, those.
I think
That
our
has-
our prohibited uses falls into what Jessica is saying is the pitfall of trying to list every permitted use, because you wind up with things that are so outdated and
So
no
I think
longer make
there
sense.
must be a smarter, you
Yeah.
guys can opine, but there must be a smarter way of doing it around.
I think you just heard.
Yeah, the categories. I
That
mean, yeah.
Not even, categories, okay, well, I see what your categories are.
Yep.
That's
I mean,
interesting.
just to think about, I mean, I don't want to try to come up with them
No.
now, but let's just,
Exactly.
right, but,
I'd be curious to see what other towns have got in that vein, and even the state plan.
yeah, most towns that I work in, maybe Jessica, you feel differently, or Steve, but they just have the catch-all. If it's not explicitly permitted,
Right.
it's prohibited.
Which is fine,
Yeah,
it's difficult.
which
But,
is fine.
I think some of the towns that I had, like back in 2000, 2010, they created these lists. And now you look back at them, you're like, what is,
Yeah, it just makes no
nobody
sense.
has printing presses anymore.
No,
You know,
right,
it's
right,
like-
right,
Uh-huh.
So,
right.
I mean, they're really hard to keep up to date. So I think if you look at, categories like retail services, office, commercial.
Give 'em a good
and
definition.
then define them,
Yeah.
because retail services could actually include restaurants, or
Right,
it could
right.
include spas, it could include a lot of different things depending on what the definition is. So it's really important that your definitions are really good.
Then the zoning officer, administrative officer knows what those definitions
Right.
mean, and when
Yeah.
one comes in,
That too.
they can accurately, he or she can actually say, accurately say, this is one of those, it's permitted. You don't have to go to the board for a use variance.
So how do we, is that something, Liz, you could help come up with these
Yeah, I can
categories?
certainly,
Would
yes.
you mind just starting that?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to make this stuff up. It'd
Yeah,
be
yeah.
nice if-
60 seconds.
And then is it fair to say that we do want to pursue good use today that is not permitted, that we may want to think about how to make them permitted, and as long, hopefully the categories will
Right.
cover some of these.
right, because as, like Deb just said, there are uses that are new, relatively new, like a microbrewery or something
Or
like
ones that we've had for years that haven't,
Right.
Jaeger lumber.
Right, right,
my
right.
friend. All right.
Thank you,
That's
Mr. Hands.
I just wanted to say kudos to David for pulling up that chart. I haven't seen that in 6 years.
I know, I just found it.
All right, for the sake of time,
Thank you, Dan.
I want to thank Ms. Still and Mr. Hands for all the hard work that they're putting in.
Yes, excellent.
It's extremely important that as we send this information out, you look at it, digest it, and come back to us with clean, clear, crisp guidance or input, because we are spending a copious amount of time putting this stuff together, and we're trying to think of everything. We're not going to get everything, but your input is valuable, and that's why we're having these discussions. So, again, thank you through the hard work that everybody's putting forward to get this done, and there's going to be a lot of house cleaning to do, so apologies for that. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes the ORC update.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent. Thank you for keeping us on track. So going forward now, we're planning to do an executive session. I think we need a motion,
Yeah, and-
correct? And do we need, how should we go into this,
Certainly.
Counselor?
We technically should have a resolution. I'm going to read it into the
Okay.
record real quick, I promise. But I do believe we have one board member who may be recusing herself from even the executive session. So we just want to make that clear. But for everyone else who's going into executive session, whereas NJSA 10:4-12, the Open Public Meetings Act permits the exclusion of the public from a meeting in certain circumstances, and whereas it's necessary for the planning board to discuss in a session not open to the public certain matters relating to items authorized by NJSA 10:4-12B7, the exceptions to the Open Public Meeting Act. Now therefore be it resolved by the planning board as follows: the public shall be excluded from the discussion of the following matter: pending litigation, affordable housing, including draft housing element and fair share plan. The general nature and the subject matter to be discussed are attorney-client privilege and litigation privilege. Its anticipated deliberations conducted in closed session may be disclosed to the public upon the determination of the board that the public interest will no longer be served by such confidentiality, and this resolution shall take effect immediately. Motion second and a roll call vote, please.
I make a motion that we move to executive with no further action.
Second.
Committeeman Lavender?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Jones?
Yes.
Ms. Dill?
Yes.
Mr. Hands?
Yes.
Mr. Lavarerio?
Yes.
Mr. Opelka?
Yes.
Chairman Richardson?
Yes,
Motion carries.
great. Executive session.
So that's.
We could do it here, right? We could just, you're on the air. No, but I mean, if we come
We're
off
gonna
of
shut
it.
down the I would highly, it was highly suggested that we go into the conference room and close.
We
the
could
door.
do
We normally go in there.
Oh, okay.
Do we need to come back to adjourn, or can we adjourn in
No,
executive
we can
session?
adjourn in
adjourn.
executive.
Just adjourned.
Okay,
Well, I
Well-
thought, he just read, no further action, right?
That's right.
no further action, correct.
That's right.
Well, that was the motion, so meaning, we'll have when we adjourn the executive, we'll have adjourned the open meeting as well.
Yes.
Can I ask one question?